All right, people, we can actually start to rejoice because there's actually a movie coming out in theaters that people are actually going to go and watch in theaters. And no, it is not Uncharted. It is the upcoming The Batman movie. I am joined by 2/3 of my panel from our Spider-Man rankings video of last month. I'm joined by Brandon, who I've decided to call Fallat for the purposes of this because it's a fun nickname, and Matt of Basic Entertainment. Guys, you ready to rank some Batman movies?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's rank some Batman movies. This is the official Batman rankings video. Stay tuned. You know what's funny, guys? As I was going down our list, I was prepping this big, long intro that was going to be like really extravagant, all about how, you know, the two comic book characters that they seem to have always gotten right, that there really aren't any bad versions of, are Spider-Man and Batman. And then I was looking down the actual movies that we had entered, and it's like, oh, wait, it's actually apparently really easy to screw up Batman. Apparently, as we're about to find out, guys, this is the official Batman rankings video. We are going to be ranking every single theatrically released Batman movie. I have to explicitly make that clear at the top because, as you guys probably already know, there's been a lot more Batman movies than there have been Spider-Man movies because the DC animation department is just a freaking machine with how consistently they churn out movies. That's why I had to put a caveat there. We are ranking every theatrically released Batman movie. We do have a few animated entries on here, but for the most part, again, only if it's theatrically released. The other caveat being that Batman has to be in the title of the movie. So
no Dark Knight.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. You guys know what I mean. No, so no Justice League, unfortunately, will be on here. But I'm joined once again, of course, the movie nerd. You guys know me. We're live on YouTube and Twitch right now, I would like to add. And I'm joined once again by Brandon, a.k.a. Fallat, and Matt of Basic Entertainment. But guys, before we got this started, I wanted to go around the panel once again, very similar to what we did a couple months ago with Spider-Man. And I want you guys to break down what it is that Batman means to you. Like, obviously, like Spider-Man, Batman is another character that a lot of people know. A lot of people of different age ranges as opposed to Spider-Man, who seems to really only appeal to, I would say, more so kids. Batman is that character that it seems like anybody of any age can relate to. Really strange. I'm not quite sure why they can relate to a guy who dresses up like a bat and goes out and beats the shit out of criminals at night. But anyways, I digress. I've seen too many Batman memes just in general about that. So I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, what does Batman mean to you? What's the earliest you remember seeing your first Batman thing? What does Batman as a character mean to you?
Batman, just like Spider-Man, kind of means a lot in the opposite way of having that kind of inner darkness. Everyone has this inner darkness in themselves, this fear, and Batman uses that to his advantage. And just from a kid, obviously, I don't care about stuff like that. But as a kid, you see him dressed as a bat. You see him with the Batmobile. You see him with the Batbot, watching him from the animated series, from the Batman series, the 2004 one.
Yeah,
I think Beyond.
Yeah.
Justice League,
Brave and the Bold too.
Brave and the Bold, all of that Batman stuff. Just love Batman in general, and just like Spider-Man, he has some awesome and just amazing villains as well. So that's what Batman means to me.
Awesome. At the end of this, we might have to put up a poll: who's got the better rogues gallery, Batman or Spider-Man? They definitely got plenty of foes to occupy both rogue galleries. Have to put it up in a poll.
Pretty easy.
Yeah. Is it? We'll come back to it. Brandon, who is Batman to you? What does Batman mean to you? What's the earliest you remember seeing Batman as a kid?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, my first entry into it was Batman and Robin because my dad loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he just showed us every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. So Batman and Robin just happened to be one of them. So I watched that a lot as a kid. But I think there's a lot of reasons why I think he's like the most famous superhero. I think one is because he was the first in a lot of ways to go on TV in the 60s show. And I think that 60s show is a really large reason why people regard Batman so highly now. I think one aspect of it is the goofiness and the campiness. People like that. They like that escapism. But I also think people are attracted to the idea of legacy and the fact that something from the 60s is still going on today, even if they're not going to see every iteration of the movie or they're not going to like everyone. I think they'll see a trailer and be like, oh, the new Batman movie. It's something that they can trust because they know that They can trust Batman to be a good guy. They can trust the Riddler to be a bad guy. They know what they're getting. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big reason why he is most important. And I think, as we'll discuss, he's the one character that you can do so many different iterations of, and they all work in their own respect. Like, you can go as campy as you want, as kid-friendly as you want, as dark as you want, as mature and adult as you want. And it all is true within the character, because Batman is the most human superhero. So because it all relates to the human experience, I think that's why.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we like I said, as we're about to break down this list, there's so many different iterations of Batman, from the campiest of the camp to the darkest of the dark to somewhere in kind of in the middle that a couple people have tried to aim for, and they haven't necessarily made them work. But I do find that really interesting because Batman, for the most part, at least you know, in more of the modern days, usually been associated as like being a really dark, really grim character. You know, he comes from this place of like depression. He's forged by the fact that his parents were murdered in cold blood in front of him, and now that haunting fact that just drives his every decision and motivating factor, and kind of, you know, disassociates him from like actually being able to form a real human connection with anyone else. And that's something that even in the most ridiculous campy schlock that we see in like the Schumacher movies and the Batman series from the 60s, it's always kind of been there, and it's always kind of been prevalent, you know, whether, you know, again, from the farcical to the miserable, you know. So that's something that I've definitely always found interesting about him as a character. To me, as far as why I gravitate towards him, it's kind of like a little bit of like a mix between the two of them. I just remember, again, for me, I feel like every experience that I have as far as media that I love always goes back to like watching shit with my brothers when I was a kid. But I remember, for me, the biggest moment, it wasn't necessarily any Batman TV series. It was, I had a Batman comic that was based off of the animated run, that was based off the animated series. And for whatever reason, it was just, I would just read this comic over and over and over and over again. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever, you know? That, and the fact that my grandpa, who also grew up loving the Batman 60s series, showed me the Batman 60s movie over and over again as a kid. So it kind of like crafted the seeds as far as like what it is, why I love Batman so much and why I gravitated towards him so much. And then obviously once I watched the Nolan movies when I was in middle school, I'm like, okay, all bets are off. Like, he's the greatest. Like, these are some of the greatest movies that I've ever seen. You know, he's the greatest superhero ever. It's the best. It's the best. And I think that kind of like, you know, kind of, it's really interesting kind of his journey cinematically as well, you know, taking that aside from the comics, because you almost kind of need like some more like the campiness of the 60 TV show, and how that campiness is still very prevalent in both the Burton movies and unbearably so in the Schumacher movies. But you almost need that in order to like kind of get this idea of Batman in your head, so that when Nolan does come in, not only with how much darker he makes the character with the Dark Knight trilogy, but almost with like how much he elevates that character to like more of a prestige level. Like, there's a reason why the Dark Knight movies are regarded as like adding like that extra level, like prestige edge to him on a cinematic scale, because they were effectively the first movies that proved that superheroes could be more than camp. Because as much legwork as those Bryan Singer X-Men movies is, though, and those Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies did, like, to me, the superhero boom begins in 2008, obviously, with The Dark Knight, which comes out only a month after Iron Man. The fact that where not only did, because by that point, not only were people convinced, okay, Batman and superheroes could make money, but they could also be taken. That was, to me, the first minute that finally proved, okay, no, these could be taken seriously as movies by not just like the comic book crowd, you know? And that's, if I'm being honest, it's kind of something that we've lost in the last couple of years as well. But we'll get into that once we get into the rankings as well. We're going to do this roundtable format the same way that we did the last time with Spider-Man. Matt, we're going to start with you. Number 11, what is yours?
Well, number 11 is going to be a Batman 66. Not a fan of it because I'm just not a fan of this era. Adam West Batman, you know, it was great that the introduction of it and just having the Batman itself, but not real fan of the powers and the punches and all that stuff in the title. Is not a fan of the villains, not a fan of the goofiness of the Batman. But I respect it, but I don't never want to go back in this era of Batman ever again.
Interesting. Got it.
Even though we kind of did later on.
Even though we kind of did a little bit later on. Yeah.
Batman, if you kind of realize it, it's like a cycle. It starts out campy and then it goes serious and it goes too serious and it goes campy and it goes too serious and it goes.
I don't know where was the too serious between Batman 89 and Batman Forever? Because there was no serious to be found. Unless you're talking about what?
Batman Returns went a little too extreme. We'll get into that.
We'll get into that one. Yeah. All right, Matt, you're number 10.
And number 10 is going to be Batman Forever. This movie gives me a headache. I don't like Riddler. I don't like the Two-Face. Tommy Lee Jones doing dumb crap and like these dumb face impressions just literally just make me want to punch him. Val Kilmer as Batman is stiff. The Robin stuff was okay.
Stiff.
Release the Schumacher cut. There's a Schumacher cut
out there. Schumacher cut of Batman Forever.
There is a Schumacher cut that's more darker, and it goes in more with the Bruce Wayne stuff that they had in Batman. It just overall, it could have been a better movie with the stuff they had on this one. But yeah, Batman Forever, not for me.
It's still kind of hilarious to me that we're expected to believe that Batman Forever and Batman and Robin take place in the same continuity as Batman and Batman Returns, because the only two people, they can't even keep Billy D. Williams as Two-Face. The only two people only two people that connect all four of those movies together. It's only two. It's Michael Gough as Alfred and Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon. Those are literally the only two people that tie those movies together continuity-wise. And wrapping up your first segment, Matt, what's your number 9?
Number 9 is Batman and Robin. Listen, I kind of have a soft spot for this because I can tolerate Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze and his cold puns, his just ridiculous puns. I could get through that than whatever two Jokers, Riddler and Two-Face, and the previous one. George Clooney does not care in this movie. He simply was just there to get a check. And I had this in DVD, so I rewatched it a lot. And it kind of hits home for more like the nostalgia factor of it. But besides that, this movie's god awful. I mean, it's not. If I'm being honest, it's worse than Batman Forever, but I appreciate it more because I watched it more.
Interesting. All right, I'll save my points for later on when I tell you that you two are both absolutely nuts. But Brandon, what is your number 11?
My number 11 is Batman Forever. I did not watch this one a lot as a kid. I don't think I saw it at all as a kid the full way through. So I actually only saw it for the first time like a couple days ago. And I think there are things to respect about it. I like that it's a wholly unique vision that's kind of blending the 60s camp with just the colors of neon, and like it's like, all right, like that's our aesthetic. I like the miniature work. I like the set design. I think the score works. I think Val Kilmer does a good job as Bruce Wayne, a surprisingly good job. His Batman feels like a parody, I think, because he's just always looking like dumbfounded and like he's stuttering over his words. And, there's a plethora of like kind of low-hanging fruit problems with it, like Nicole Kidman or Tommy Lee Jones or Jim Carrey. Like there's all that kind of stuff. I think the movie mostly succeeds in what it's trying to do, which is just sell toys and things like that. But it's trying to be two movies at once, where it's trying to be the first ever live action, deep introspective look at Bruce Wayne, because we didn't get that previously in any of the Batman movies. But then at the same time, it's trying to be this live action cartoon. And because of that, it just feels tonally imbalanced. It feels like a mess. There's nothing was being committed to, and it's I find it very unmemorable, and and I like the word Matt said with him Kilmer being stiff, because that's kind of how the movie felt to me. Like it was so wacky and cartooning, but it ended up giving me a headache too by the end. Yeah. I just said, I'm okay with this one. I don't think this is doing the job right. My number 10 is Batman 66. I think this one's very important because I think it adds to, why it adds a lot more than people give it credit for as to why Batman is so popular. I think because people I think when people go to see Batman Begins or something, I think they like thinking, wow, like look how far we've come from the shark repellent and things like that. So I think the movie has like a fondness there, but I'm also not from that generation, so it's hard for me to connect to it because, even my young Batman movies were like Batman and Robin and things like that, which were a lot more visually interesting than the 60s movie. There's really not much I can say about this one. It's just I think it serves its role, and it's awesome that we have a Batman in existence as campy and as just like wholeheartedly and confidently crazy and fun as this. But it's it's not really something I'm going to go back to on a Saturday night. Number 9 is Batman and Robin, because I'm biased because this was the one I grew up with. But I think this one succeeds more than Batman Forever. I'm not saying it's a better movie, but I think it succeeds more in what it's trying to do. I don't think there's anything wrong with making a Batman movie that's purely for toddlers, because Batman is a comic book character at heart. So if you can have the darkest movies you want, but you don't need every single iteration of the character to be that. You can do one that's as zany and fun as all three of these movies. But this one, I actually think in a way succeeds more because it commits to a tone. It commits to the ridiculous garbage tone that it is. And because of that, it's an easier watch. I don't get as much of a headache watching it, and I can remember a lot of the scenes more because it's committing to it, and it's a more coherent narrative. And instead of having Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones like screaming at each other the whole time, you have Arnold, who is an engaging presence. Even if he's miscast as Mr. Freeze, you like watching Arnold, and it's interesting seeing his take on it. And yes, is it awful? Yes, but I almost akin it to like Mortal Kombat Annihilation, where it's like, oh, I can watch this like on a Saturday night. This is a lot of fun. And I remember like a few years ago, I rewatched it actually, and it wasn't awful. Like I wasn't like rolling my eyes and like, punching a table. Like it's not that much of a crime against humanity. It's just like a fun. And here's the thing. It served its role because as a little kid, I watched it and I really liked it. You know what I mean? So little kids watch that movie, maybe it happened with Batman Forever in the 60s show too. But for me, I watched it and it got me into Batman. So yeah, I'll grow up and not look at it as fondly. But for what it did, it worked. Am I doing number 8 or no?
Yeah, no, it's only 11 through 9 for this one. And all that I'm going to say is that I am definitely seeing I'll call it the Star Wars prequel effect happen in real time, which is where the Star Wars prequel, I have yet to come up with an actual name for this, but it's a phrase that describes when a movie comes out. It's hated upon its initial release. Then people hate on it for so long that eventually there's that one person that comes out and is like, hey, was this really as bad as we remember? And then you see a full reversal effect of people being like, hey, this wasn't that bad. Especially if something comes out after the fact that is worse than it. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with Batman and Robin, which is my number 11 because, like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go for the fact of it's like, oh, it's campy, oh, it's fun, it's for kids, they commit to the tone, whatever. Yeah, it's Arnold cracking ice one-liners. Look, I'll admit, first and foremost, that I have watched every single YouTube montage of all of Arnold's terrible one-liners from that movie, and they do.
You're not gonna send me to the cooler.
They do give me a chuckle. I will say that, and Schumacher definitely commits. But no, this movie is absolute garbage. I'm sorry, but when you have Clooney openly talking about the fact of how much he hated working on this movie, when you have Schumacher who openly, the first thing that he would say whenever people would get to set would be like, okay, we are making a toy commercial. That is the thing that he would say. The first thing that he would say whenever they would get started on set. The fact that Schumacher had to come out and make an open apology for this movie. This is easily the worst Batman movie ever made. Yeah, sure, it's fun and campy, but it doesn't apologize for it being an absolute garbage movie and an absolute chore. Also, I'm sorry, I love how you guys were talking about Arnold and none of you neglected to mention Uma Thurman because she's absolutely fucking atrocious in this movie with the terrible puns and the one-liners. Like I said, I don't have too much to add about Batman and Robin. Everybody on the internet has already talked to death about this movie. What I do have a decent amount to say about is my number 10, which is Batman Forever, which is interesting because this is the most recent Batman movie I watched. I actually watched this movie for the first time on Monday. I'd never seen it before up until this day. And Batman Forever is that really interesting case where in the last couple of years, you were starting to see kind of what you guys were doing right now with Batman and Robin, where people were coming around and being like, Batman Forever, is that as bad as I remember? And here's what I will say about this movie, having just watched it. I think that the ideas are there, and I'm not opposed to the idea of Schumacher trying to kind of sort of continue with the tone that was set up by Burton with the first two movies, and then obviously they fired him with the whole McDonald's debacle that happened there. Before he just completely jumped ship and just ended up doing his own thing with Batman and Robin. And I will say that kind of his adherence to that, while also, surprisingly enough, getting, I think, a very underrated Batman performance out of Val Kilmer. I really do actually think that outside of the movie itself, Val Kilmer is an underrated choice. I think he nails the mannerisms of Bruce Wayne really well, and I surprisingly think that, like, kind of as the straight man to everyone else who is just going at it like batting 1,000 with the overacting, and it is ridiculous to say the least. Like Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey, it's kind of sort of entertaining to watch them in the overacting Olympics in this movie, but it definitely becomes a little bit too much.
More entertaining than Mr. Freeze.
I think here's what I'll say.
Yeah,
I think
that's
the
one
most
guy too.
I'll say this. I think the most offensive thing about this movie is Tommy Lee Jones say, and I had this written down in my review here. I think the most offensive thing is Tommy Lee Jones kind of like trying to give Jim Carrey shit for like his acting style and just like his overly zany nature, like both on and off the set. And it's like, come on, guy. Like, first off, you're full of shit. Second of all, are you seeing the performance that you're giving right now? And I know a couple people are trying to say, oh, but they were ahead of the time with like kind of the whole mind box thing. I'm sorry. No, it's not. This is the only, like I said, the only thing that separates this from Batman and Robin for me is the fact that it's like, it's almost kind of like interesting how bad this movie gets. This was Chris O'Donnell, like kind of sort of giving a performance before he just went full on punchline phase in Batman and Robin. And yeah, this movie is really not that much better. But like I said, it's better slightly than a hair because it's not the worst Batman movie ever made. My number 9, controversial choice, but I still stick by it all these years later. Batman versus Superman. Terrible movie. I've come around a lot on the Snyder stuff. I really have. I've come around on Man of Steel. Snyder Cut surprised the hell out of me. Was actually shocked. This is the one that's like, I'm sorry, I can't justify it. I can't justify Jesse Eisenberg as Luthor. I can't justify the blatant, unabashed underusage of Superman. I know everybody said, oh, the extended cut made it that much better. It really didn't. I'm sorry. It really didn't. But you can imagine my surprise when in a movie called Batman versus Superman that is very clearly based off of The Dark Knight. That is very clearly based off The Dark Knight Returns. Yeah, Ridge Cinema, he's with me. He gets it. That is very clearly based off The Dark Knight Returns, where Batman, again, even though it is a co-lead movie where Batman is very clearly the central character of the movie, just how much they missed with the actual Batman portion for no other reason other than it feels like a fanboy's version of Batman rather than like actually Batman. Like Ben Affleck, God bless him, is trying his hardest. He really is in order to like try and capture the accurate portrayal. But I think the most that the movie gives me about like Batman as a character in this movie, aside from the fact that he hates Superman, understandably so, that did a really good job with setting that up, is that he brands people, criminals, and kills them. Same way, which the Burton movies kind of already gave him. Yeah, exactly. What other thing can you tell me about that, about Batman, other than like that half good, I'll say it, half good first meeting exchange that he has with Superman that is then promptly ruined by Jesse Eisenberg after the fact? This movie's not good. I'm still kind of mad at the people who still claim that this is a good movie because there are 2 actually really good Snyder movies that this is cushioned in between, but this movie is just not it. So that's my number 9, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Moving on back over to Matt. Matt, your 8 through 6. Let's hear it.
I'm gonna kick it off with seems like a hot take in this group. Batman Returns. Not a fan of it. Danny DeVito's Penguin was too much, and it clearly showed that Tim Burton went full extreme Tim Burton. And before I preference this, I'm not a huge Tim Burton guy. He has a style, he has a way how he does his movies. Not a fan of it. I'm not, it doesn't appeal to me. Pauses of the movie is Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. She was great. But besides that, it's kind of forgettable. It goes too extreme, like I said. And Tim Burton, like in this movie, in the one I'm gonna have next, he clearly does not care for the Bruce Wayne character. Bruce Wayne, Batman, is barely even in these movies, and it is troublesome. He clearly has different stuff that he wants to prioritize, and that's Penguin, that's Catwoman, that's the darkness of Gotham. And yeah, so this movie, not for me at all.
Yes, number 7.
Number 7 is Batman 89. Now, this one is slightly better than Returns. It's not a bad movie. It does have its, parts in it. The Batmobile, it really kind of evolutionized the character of taking him away from the Adam West campiness into this dark light that we know. And, Batmobile, the bat suit, everything about it was great. The score, Danny Elfman's score, amazing. But once again, like I mentioned, characters like Jim Gordon. I mean, who the hell is Jim Gordon in these movies? I mean, he is a buffoon in these movies. He doesn't do anything. Bruce Wayne, once again, Tim Burton gives him a little bit to do with Michael Keaton, and Michael Keaton gives a good performance. But it's not enough for me. Jack Nicholson's Joker saves this movie for me.
All right. And number 6.
Number 6. What is number 6? Actually, let me
I'll help you out.
BVS. Dawn of Justice. Dawn of Justice. Yeah.
You're like,
sorry,
Dom.
Dom.
Listen for a second. Nah, you're good. Yeah. You're good. That's why I got the docket pulled up here and back up.
But not even apologizing for that. I got to apologize for me having this because I know not a fan of you. Just went on a little spiel. But I think it's not as bad as people think. Ultimate Edition, slightly better, has some stuff. But if we're taking away the Superman stuff, which, yes, I agree, they don't give him anything to do. And it's really it's sucky what they did with Superman. But Batman in general, You could tell Snyder was a fan of Batman. You could tell he had more interest in the Batman character. Give them some great moments. Give them Ben Affleck, which honestly, he's not. I mean, we could have seen more of him, but I don't think he was a bad choice for Batman at the time. And he clearly showed it, being a dominant force of a Batman, and it clearly kind of he was going for something, but it's in the way how Snyder was trying to do this universe, the cinematic trait that MC was doing. He killed off a lot of great stories. You know, he killed off a Robin. He killed off that story. He killed off a lot of stuff for us to see that. And the warehouse scene is the best Batman scene of all time. That's one of the best action comic book scenes of all time. I don't care what anyone says. That scene itself saves the entire movie.
Hold on a second. Back up a second there, because you just said two different things. Are you talking, is that the best Batman scene or the best comic book action scene? Comic book action scene I can give you. Batman scene?
It's one of the best ones.
Okay, all right.
It's one of the best ones. I don't think it's now I don't think about it. I don't think it is.
It's not the best. We all know what the single greatest Batman moment on screen is. I mean, it's down to 2 for me, but we'll save that. So
we'll save it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll save that for later. Once we get to the Nolan trilogy. But Brandon, you're 8 through 6.
Yeah. My number is my number 8. What I think it. Yeah. Okay. So it's Batman v Superman.
Man, we are just full of forgetting our lists today.
Yeah, Batman v Superman is an interesting movie, man. It's. I don't think it's awful.
To me, this is where the death of cinema that we've been experiencing these last 6 years begins with this movie.
I think it started a little earlier than that, maybe, but
fair. I guess it's because all the soft reboots that we got in 2015 were all for the most part good. So.
Yeah, I think with Batman v Superman, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that it's playing with, and I think it's playing with way too many of them. And I think the Ultimate Edition, it makes sense. It makes more sense of the plot, but it overcomplicates something that shouldn't be as complicated. And it deals with so many themes of gods among men and power among the powerless, and like vengeance, blah, blah, and it just gets to a point where you're just like, oh my god, I don't even like it. Just Ben Affleck's fine. I think it's hard for me to give a lot of credit though, because him and Snyder are literally just taking the Dark Knight Returns, aging him down a bit, and then going like, all right, that's it. I think his Batman's fine. I don't really mind the murdering thing as much. Because,
I don't get why that was a complaint in the first place. I really don't.
Yeah,
I guarantee it's probably because the Nolan movies made such a big deal about the fact that he doesn't kill people and he's always like, no guns.
And people look at the Nolan trilogy as definitive, so they go, oh, this is deviating, so this is illegitimate. I think Batman v Superman is mediocre. I think the first 2 hours of this movie doesn't even feel like a coherent narrative. It's just a bunch of scenes randomly thrown together, and it's kind of like flowing from one to the other, and you're like, what is happening? There's Lois Lane's plot, and Superman's walking around, and then Batman's like doing his crazy thing with the kryptonite, but then he's gonna steal the kryptonite from Lex, but Lex is already gonna steal it from this guy, and then he happens to steal it from. It's so. I remember they cut an action scene that could have been the best scene in the movie, where Batman has to steal the kryptonite from Lex. They don't even show that scene, and I would have been much more interested in seeing that action sequence of like a stealth Batman stealing the kryptonite from guys, rather than that car chase that leads into like him like T-bowing freaking Superman. Their fight was fine, although like once it's like him hitting him over the head with the
it was underwhelming.
That was like, hilarious. I was laughing by that scene. I was like, what is this? I'm like, we waited 2.5 hours for this bullshit.
Yeah, the movie is just such a hodgepodge of like some ideas that work and missed opportunities, and it's very mediocre.
Not at the end good.
I don't think it's awful, but at the end of the day, it's just so mediocre, and it's just so underwhelming. And it was when Snyder was still doing that shaky cam close-up stuff, where he fixed it in the Snyder Cut, but at this point he was still doing it, and he was trying to be all dark.
Bad. That's another problem that I had with that warehouse sequence, Matt. I would agree with you that it would be awesome if I could tell what the fuck was going on because of how horribly edited it is.
I'll say this about the warehouse scene. It feels a little too choreographed at times. Like when Ben Affleck is on the ground and he's literally going like he's blocking guys hitting him with knives. He's going like ching, ching, and then he's doing like two. Like there's it gets to a point where like, all right, like to me it's like
I get what you're saying.
He's clearly executing moves, and he's thinking about, okay, I gotta hit this move here, and that's one of those things that takes me off. Also, I'll say this about Ben Affleck: when he's in the bat suit, I never quite feel like he's really comfortable in it.
Right.
And that's just a little
brings back a lot of Keaton, right? Where
back.
I mean, Keaton also uncomfortable in the suit.
Speaking of which, my number 7 is Batman 89. This movie is really dull. I think there's a lot of good stuff in it. I think Jack Nicholson is so awesome as the Joker. I think he's really ahead of his time as the Joker. He wasn't just being Jack Nicholson, like doing a shtick. He was like, because that's kind of what Jim Carrey was doing as Riddler. But Jack Nicholson really got like the nuance of the character. He married that with the goofiness that you get in like the 60s show and then the comics. And that kind of inspired all the other Jokers that we've seen, for better or worse. And I think the movie looks awesome at times. I mean, like the way, like the heavy shadows and the blacks and the Danny Elfman score and the way the Batmobile looks. There's a lot of classic things in it. But I think as a plot, it's so scattershot. It's so all over the place. Act 2 drags so long. There's so many action scenes that kind of go on for so long, and whenever there's like a scene in Gotham in the daytime, it's very flat looking. It's like, like they're really relying on the shadows,
and the matte paintings.
Yeah, so I think Michael Keaton, I gotta be honest, I don't really like his performance as Batman. I think a lot of it is hindered by the fact that he's the third main character in both of his movies. Because even in this movie, Vicky Vale's the main character. She's the one that we're following through this whole thing. So his Bruce Wayne is very passive and unconvincing. When he's Batman, he's got the voice down, but he moves really stiff because of the suit. And I think it's fine, and I it's watchable. But I think while it's important, I don't I just find it really dull. And then my number 6 is Lego Batman. I think this movie's awesome. I think it's a lot of fun. I get all the lols and the LMAOs, and I think it really understands Batman, to Rizzy's point, like better than a lot of the other movies, because he's the main character. It delves into his psychosis, I guess, a little bit. I just think as a kid's movie, it's really fun, and that's all it's trying to be. And yeah, I remember seeing it in the theater, laughing a lot. I did not think it was like one of the best animated movies I'd ever seen.
How dare you, sir?
Oh, no.
How dare you, sir?
I was like, oh, this is really fun. And it's something that I'm sure little kids love. And this probably will get them into Batman, like Batman and Robin did for me, and like the 60s show did for like my dad, So I think it's serving that role, and it's really awesome to see. Would I say like, oh, this is like a definitive portrayal of the Dark Knight? And this, like, no, like not at all. So it could have been my number 5, knowing what my number 5 is, but I don't really, I don't think about this one too much.
Oh, man. Oh, you just broke my heart in 7 different pieces and just put it all back together again, did you? Real quick, I just wanted to give a shout out to the one and only Brando Critic. Brandon, thanks for tuning in, dude. That means the world to me. You have no idea. Moving on to my number 8. That's where we're at. Yes, that's where we're at. Number 8, Batman 89. I am consistently baffled by the amount of people online that say that this is the definitive Batman movie when, like Brandon said, Batman is the third lead in this movie. Here's my biggest problem with this movie. It has nothing to do with the fact of like the whole Batman being the third lead or the Nicholson thing or anything like that. I have 2 major problems with this movie. It's a fine, competently made movie. It works as far as like kind of transitioning Batman into the next phase of where he needed to go in order to like continue where comic book movies were going, because we hadn't really had a competently made comic book movie since the 78 Superman movie, and this was like kind of needed as far as showing, okay, comic book movies can still be made and have legs. They got Tim Burton, who was fresh off of Beetlejuice. This was like his 3rd movie that he did after Pee-wee and Beetlejuice. And so it was when the studios could still kind of control him a little bit. And aside from the fact that it really doesn't let Tim Burton go all out, which is something that I really appreciate about Batman Returns, my whole thing is I'm with you, Matt. I'm not the biggest fan of Tim Burton. I really only like Tim Burton when he goes full unhinged, like with something like Batman Returns or Mars Attacks, or when he like actually like gets really deep and introspective, like Edward Scissorhands or Ed Wood. I'm not a fan of anything that he did really in the last decade. Unfortunately, I don't think anything that he did in the last decade was really that good. Even that weird Big Eyes movie that he did with Amy Adams and Christoph Waltz. But this movie doesn't give us full unhinged Burton. And also the fact that I'm probably the only person in the world that doesn't think that Nicholson is that good of a Joker, if only because, and internet, please do not come after me for this. Obviously, Ledger, Hamill, Joaquin, even though I have problems with the Joker movie, they're all better than him, to be completely honest. Like, Nicholson, to me, in this movie, in hindsight, I'm not going to fault him for the performance, because at the time, he was given the performance of what was needed. But in hindsight, it really does just come off as Nicholson doing like a slapstick routine, as opposed to like him actually embodying the character of the Joker, because he was so far surpassed by everybody that came after him. Also, I'm really mad at this movie for robbing us of what could have been one of the most brilliant performances of all time, because the studio fucking gaslit Robin Williams, so that they could get Nicholson in order to market the movie, because Nicholson only did the movie when he found out how much money they were going to offer Robin Williams to do it, which I'm like, could you imagine Robin Williams as the Joker? I'm telling you, that would have changed his entire career, and it would have given us possibly one of the best performances of all time. But I digress. We can't live in alternative what if universes. We have to live in the universe that we have. So yeah, for all of those reasons and more, like I said, you guys pretty much answered all the rest of the points as far as why this movie is not the best definitive Batman movie ever. Batman 89 is number 8. My number 7 is Batman 66. Yeah, this is where the bias comes out. I love this movie. This movie is absolute camp. It is an absolute schlock fest, and I have it here for no other reason other than the fact that I have just the absolute fondest memories of watching this with my grandpa. When I was a kid, I watched it at the perfect age. I was like 6 or 7 years old when I watched it the first time. I thought it was the funniest, the silliest, the stupidest thing. And even going back, I can still watch it with reverence, because it's like, guys, this is clearly not at all trying to be anything else other than what it is. It knows exactly what it is. It is a fun, campy, zany extension of the TV show that was out at the time. And if you go and thinking that it's anything else, well, I'm sorry, you clearly don't understand what it is that you're watching right here. Like I said, not too much to say about it. Everybody that was involved knew what they were making at the time, and it's just a boatload of fun. Number 6, like I said, this Batman Returns kind of does everything that I wanted Batman 89 to be, and then also everything that I didn't want Batman 89 to be. What I wanted it to go was go full on Tim Burton, and by God, it does that and more. We're talking like armies of like walking robot penguins. You've got Danny DeVito biting a dude's face off. You've got the craziest like early BDSM stuff that you could possibly ever get. You've got some truly like baffling, ridiculous moments, but not in like a campy, schlocky way. Like, there's something about the way that Tim Burton delivers like the camp and the schlock in his movies when it's done well that feels like really like appealing and funny. It's almost like I feel like kind of like it's like between him and Sam Raimi as far as being able to do schlock, but that doesn't feel like schlock. Like the moment when Christopher Walken, which, by the way, the fact that he gets Christopher Walken in a Batman movie, and it's not one of the more talked about things in Batman lore, is criminal. But the fact that he has Christopher Walken saying, "Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed as Batman?" and Michelle Pfeiffer saying, "He is Batman, you idiot." And for that moment to not be ridiculed and actually like come off as funny and kind of work, I think that kind of a lot of the emotion and pathos that a lot of people complain about the Burton movies not having, I think can actually be found in this movie. Because I do think that like the most emotion that we get from Keaton's performance as Batman comes from his back and forth moments with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in this movie. I think a moment that constantly sticks out to me is the moment when they're at the ball and they're dancing with each other. They both realize their respective other identities, and she's kind of saying, "Is like, does this mean we have to fight now?" Like that moment, like that really sticks with me for whatever reason. So I think that by kind of going all out, Burton was kind of able to get into a lot of the humanity of these characters that he was unfortunately unable to in the previous installment. But, McDonald's thought that it was too dark, so they couldn't sell toys. So unfortunately, he was fired and replaced by Schumacher, and the rest is history there. So, and then, what's it called? So those are my 8 through 6. Going back over to Matt. Matt, you're going to give us 5 through 3, and then we'll do 2 and 1 after that. So 5 through 3.
Number 5, Lego Batman. 2 things I love growing up as a kid is Legos, and it was Batman. Still to this day, collecting certain Legos. Got the Batmobile from the new Batman right behind me next to the Pop. And this movie, just as a Batman fan, it was fun to watch. It was enjoyable. It was easy. It was also kind of, awesome because it was still that quality of the Lego movie brought over to this movie. And those Lego movies were great in a technical aspect. But no, it was a fun time. Made some great jokes in the moment. A lot of Superman jokes are funny. It was overall just a good time as a Batman fan. A lot of Easter eggs, and yeah, that's number 5. Don't have too much to say about it, but it is pretty good. Number 4 is Batman Begins. Okay, so I like Batman Begins. It's a good origin movie for the Bruce Wayne character. It's a great origin movie for Batman. It's great from bringing him back. Once like the recycle, like I kind of talked about, I kind of brought it up. Got to get away from the Schumacher stuff. Brought him in here, and like Don was talking about, it kind of paved the way of, maybe these movies can be taken seriously. And this movie was the beginning of that. What I'm not a fan of, though, is the edits in this movie. It's very jarring in some parts. Scarecrow, wasn't a fan of Scarecrow. Wasn't a fan of Liam Neeson. I was in the beginning, and I don't know what was going on at the end. But overall, it's a solid beginning of this trilogy, and it really comes back in fruition in Dark Knight Rises. Number 3, Batman: Mask of the Phantasma. This movie is pretty much the origin movie of the animated series. I actually checked this out for the first time last year or 2 years ago, and I can't remember it too much, but knowing that I'm a fan of the animated series, so it already has that. It has Joker Mark Hamill. It has my Joker Mark Hamill, my definitive Joker, and my definitive Batman Kevin Conroy. Can't go wrong with them. Can't go wrong with the animated series. The Phantasma part about it, the whole mystery of who this character was, I saw it coming a mile away. We already knew it was, who was it, that blonde chick? I forgot. Right, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Whatever her.
Yeah.
Valentina. Whatever. I'm looking it up right now.
But it was still the anime series treatment, and it was good fun, and it was shorter than Batman Begins, so it's less of a hassle, I guess, to watch. That's it. It was a 5-3.
Yeah, 5-3. Yeah, and it was Andrea Beaumont is the name of the character, Batman's previous love, who showed that he could potentially have an alternate route outside Batman. Brandon, what is your 5-3?
Sure. So number 5 is Batman Returns. I only liked it slightly more than 1989's Batman, but it's oddly very different from that movie. It is Burton unhinged. And I think, for better or worse, because I like the Christmassy Edward Scissorhands aesthetic of it. I like kind of switching out the shadows and the blacks for blues and like wintry colors. Like, I think that works. I think Michelle Pfeiffer is amazing as Catwoman. I think she is like,
agreed.
Even though she's not like maybe like what you'd think is like the comic book interpretation of the character, I still think she's the definitive live action Catwoman we've got. Her character, she's kind of the template for that weirdo turned supervillain role that we've seen. Jamie Foxx made Spider-Man 2, Guy Pearce Iron Man 3, Uma Thurman Batman and Robin, Kristen Wiig Wonder Woman 84.
God, they really have done that trope a lot, haven't they?
Jim Carrey Batman Forever. She's kind of the template, and she's kind of the best one because you actually like her when she's the weirdo in the beginning. Like when she comes back to her apartment and says like, I'm home. Oh wait, I'm not married. That's hilarious. It's awesome. Yeah. And when she's Catwoman, her suit really pops off screen. That latex material, the suit is really interesting to look at. Like it's not like hidden in the shadows. It just like sticks out. And her physicality in the role is great. I think she's amazing in the movie. She's the best part about it. DeVito is, for this interpretation of Penguin, the perfect guy to do it. He really hams it up in the best way possible, and like you're kind of along for that ride. Keaton, again, he's very passive and unconvincing in the role. I think he, in a lot of ways, other than like Clooney, he's like the most boring Batman. Like I just have no interest in like what he's bringing to the role. But I think this movie succeeds where Batman 89 doesn't for me, in the fact that there's a lot more memorable, fun, interesting sequences that it creates. Like the back and forth between Batman and Selena Kyle, where they're having the date, and then they both have to leave to go fight each other, but they're telling Alfred to tell the other individual like stories. Like, that's a fun sequence. Then you get to the scene at the end where they're dancing at the ball, and it's revealed, we like each other, but we're also fighting each other. That's a great reveal. With Batman and Penguin, they're both playing this political game, trying to get the city to turn on the other. And like, it's a kind of like a game of leverage, and it's fun, it's interesting, and I'm invested in it for the first 2 acts. Once the third act comes in, and then you get into the whole Penguin stuff with like literal armies of missile-armed penguins.
Come on, man! You don't like missile-armed penguins?
It's impossible not to just check out at that moment and go, all right, whatever. and so the movie, I think it's flawed. I think it's a lot more consistently entertaining and interesting than any of the Batman movies prior to Batman Begins, live action ones, that is. So I have fun with it. I don't think it's like really good by any stretch of imagination, but I think it's an improvement. And I would have liked to have seen that world continue. What was I gonna say? So number 4 is Phantasm. Yeah, this one's awesome. This one's great because yes, it's short, it's sweet, it's economical, it's tight. It's like I think it's only like 80 something minutes.
Something like hour 16. I don't think it makes the full 80.
Yeah, it understands the Bruce Wayne character arguably better than any live action movie has to date because, he's not just like brooding the whole time, but they show him as a normal guy, but he's also tortured. He's complex. There's layers. It's telling a very personal story, and I think this, and there's a lot of good things about it. I love how Joker's involved in it. I love how it's not just the Joker show, but he plays a key role that has like weight to it, dramatic weight. I love the Andrea Beaumont character and what she represents. I love the relationship between Alfred and Bruce in the movie. I love the animation and the score. It's beautiful. There's so many awesome sequences, like where Batman is almost unmasked and he has to outrun the police on foot. That's a scene that we have not seen in any live action Batman movie to date. Like a scene where, oh my God, Batman's about to be unmasked. He's got to like get out of there and like, think on his feet and really show his ingenuity. I like those fight or flight moments, but I think the thing that separates is the scene where he talks to the grave of his dead parents. That's the standout moment in this movie for me because it just speaks volumes. I'll go back and rewatch it from time to time. It just understands the character so damn well that he won't allow himself to be happy because he has this misguided sense of duty and responsibility. And it's just, I just think it's a really powerful story that is condensed into a really presentable film for like kids to like, So I think that's a pretty big feat. My number 3 is Dark Knight Rises. I think it's easily the weakest of the Dark Knight trilogy because it's the only one that veers or starts to veer into, dare I say, generic mainstream comic book type of a movie, especially by that third act. I think there's a lot of good things in the movie. I think the first 2 acts is a lot more jumbled than like the first 2 acts of the previous 2 movies. It's a little bit similar. I don't want to say it's anything like Batman v Superman, but it's similar in the sense where it's a lot of just scenes that are just kind of thrown together and you're cutting all these different perspectives and you get a little jumbled. There's a lot of those I don't like focusing on like plot holes and dumb logistical surface level issues, but the fact that like every single policeman gets like thrown into this tunnel and they all get trapped in this like Tale of Two Cities thing, it's just it strains credibility a little bit, I think there's certain scenes that don't belong in the Nolan verse that are in this movie. Like when you have like the guy on this Pittsburgh Steelers running and the field's exploding behind him. That's a fun scene to look at.
What are you talking about? They needed that shot for the trailer, Brandon.
No, I think it's fun, but I don't think it fits the Dark Knight trilogy. It's too showy and like CGI explosions where that football field is not blown up behind him at all. I think Tom Hardy's Bane's effective. I think Anne Hathaway's Catwoman's fine. I think it's all good. It's really good. It has a really effective conclusion, and it's a great theater movie. And that's why I say it was the first Batman movie that veered into that comic book culture we have now, where it's a whole culture of clapping like seals and yeah, woohoo, they did the thing. Like this was.
You say it was the first one, which is ironic because it's the same year as the first Avengers movie too.
I mean it's the first Batman movie.
Okay.
Like it's the first. Marvel movies did that before, but out of Batman movies, this was the first one that was like the moment where Bane dies is I like it as a moment. I like the fact that a character unrelated to that tension is the one to off him. I like that as a storyteller. But the way in which it was told was like a fun boom, boom, like, and then like everybody goes like, yeah, they did it, And then even the movie builds to like that end moment where you find out that Bruce Wayne's alive, and it's like, oh yeah, woohoo! And it's because of that, and then the fact that you have the Dark Knight, which is like a crime thriller, and then you get into this movie in the finales. We got to stop the big scary bomb. We got to bring it over the water. If we dip it in the water, we'll be safe. It gets a little too pedestrian for the Dark Knight trilogy, so I think it's fun, but I think it's jumbled, and I think it has some flaws.
Interesting. All right. I see where you're coming from. You're wrong, but I see where you're coming from. I understand all the criticisms towards The Dark Knight Rises.
Even when I'm wrong, I'm right.
I understand it, but everyone that criticizes that movie is wrong. I'm going to breeze through my 5 through 3 as quickly as I can because we are running low on time and because I want to nerd out with Matt about The Dark Knight Rises for just a little bit as two of the only people who understand how awesome that movie is. My number 5, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Another one that I watched very recently and was blown away by. I've gotten a chance to watch a few episodes of the animated series. I really, really like it. I think the thing that I really enjoy about the animated series the most is the fact that it's really the only thing that kind of pays homage to the origin of Batman, even before the 60s series, which was kind of, these pulpy noir detective stories. They really, really engage in that at the most. And for everything that you said, Brandon, and more, this is really the only Batman movie that dives into his psyche and his kind of what drives him, and also kind of gives him an out as far as okay, if he had kind of an alternative path outside of Batman, and the way that it builds to that and the way that it hits all those emotional beats, it's massively done. And again, the fact that it is animated, the fact that the animation is still so crisp, the fact that it tells arguably one of the most mature stories I've ever seen, the fact that it doesn't even hit the full 80 minutes, I think it only cracks 79 minutes total is what we end up looking at, maybe a little bit less, I don't know. It's an absolute masterclass in storytelling, animation, or otherwise. My number 4 is the Lego Batman movie, and this has a lot more in common with Mask of the Phantasm than people may give it credit for, because for the simple reason that even though this is a Lord and Miller parody, and I hate to deign it that because I think that is such a disservice to the masterful work that Lord and Miller have done as far as their contributions to the art of cinema in the last couple of years. But I will say that this is the only other movie that I've ever seen as ridiculous and as parody and as much more kind of light-filled as Mask of the Phantasm is dark, is it actually does question why Batman does what he does, and kind of questioning it's yeah, Batman, you need some other people in your life other than just the Justice League, who doesn't even actually care about him, and it does that thing that every 21st century comedy does, which is has the main character saying, oh, I don't need this one thing that I clearly need, that is so obviously the thing that I'm missing. It has every other character telling him that he needs this, while at the same time also, and then obviously, dangling it right in front of him as far as being really obvious about it, but it's Lord and Miller, so they're doing it in an absolute genius way. The animation is impeccable. The voiceover cast is the most underrated thing because everyone talks about this movie as... Everybody talks about this movie as far as for the parody edge, but the voice cast, underrated as hell. Underrated as hell. Wow. I love Batman, the tight bodysuit. He was my Tom of Finland growing up. I totally get you guys. Interesting comment right there is all that I'm gonna say. But yeah, this movie kicks ass. Will Arnett's awesome as Batman, underrated Batman. I think that he, in my opinion, he's right under Bale and Conroy for me as far as being the best Batman. He's fucking awesome. Galifianakis is Joker. Fuck Joaquin. Fuck Jared Leto. Get them out of there. Zach Galifianakis is where it's at. Michael Cera, possibly the best on-screen Robin we've ever got, if for nothing else other than the fact that who do we have to compare it to? Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who we don't find out is Robin until the closing shot of The Dark Knight Rises. Chris O'Donnell, pass. Michael Cera, easily the best on-screen version of Robin that we've ever gotten. This movie rules. It's the best. It's the funniest. I saw this with Dustin the Duster Mason in an empty theater, except for one other family who probably we braved a snowstorm to watch the movie, and it was the highlight of our February right before we watched Get Out 2 weeks later. It was a magical time, February of 2017. I absolutely missed it. I want to say that John Wick 2 also came out that month. Anyways, February 2017. Underrated month. And my number 3, Batman Begins. This movie is awesome. This is the movie that kind of the thing that I always kind of think of when I think about this movie is the fact that, wow, this is the movie that kind of made me realize why it is that Batman is just the best. It's just everything that he does. Like I said before, Nolan, when he was offered this movie, his whole thing was, he's like, okay, I want to take everything that they did with Batman and Robin and not do that and pivot away from that. And he did that and more, just as far as making an actual prestige movie. Because the thing about this movie is that even though it is not a Batman movie for the first hour and a half, it actually, I know a lot of people make fun of the I'm Batman moment, but man, this movie fucking earns that shit. I love him hanging out in the Himalayas and him learning the way of the ninja and the jujitsu montage. I love the way that they tell the origin story through flashback and that, how we learn and meet all the other characters through flashback, how we learn about the corruption of Gotham. The way that I think Nolan tells the story in here, I think excuses some of the other flaws. I'll absolutely admit the action is horrible. absolutely horrific in this movie. The way that they bring everything back around with the constant twists, yeah, it doesn't work as well. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why this movie of the Nolan trilogy is the least rewatchable, mostly just because I've seen it so many damn times. But this movie, it's the best. Mostly because it's the first freaking live action Batman movie where Batman is the main character of his movies, which you would think would not be that difficult of a task to overcome, given that, the title of all of his movies are Batman. But hey, who knew? It only took
Batman Forever, he was the main character.
Was he?
Yes.
I don't know. Tomato is all I'm gonna say. But yeah, Batman Begins. It's the best. So
no, he was the lead.
Tomato. Anyways, so what we're gonna do here is is Brandon, I'm gonna have you go first as far as breaking down your number 2, which is Batman Begins. Then Matt and I are gonna nerd out about Dark Knight Rises and why it's awesome. So Brandon,
all right, yeah,
Batman Begins, your number 2.
Batman Begins. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it's awesome. I think a lot of the reason it's probably not higher for a lot of people is just because it's overshadowed by a certain other movie. But I think it's crazy that this is kind of the definitive live action origin of Batman. So it's kind of, if you've noticed, we haven't seen an origin of Batman since. We've gotten several origins of Spider-Man, and I think we're going to be getting a new one in that freshman year TV show that they're doing.
True.
But with Batman, we got this origin, and then everyone else is like, we can't do it like that. We can't do it that good. We got to go do something else.
Yep.
I think it's awesome. I love that it has a kind of orange glow to it. I think that looks awesome. I think it's really rewatchable, and I love Christian Bale. I think the only thing is I wish Maggie Gyllenhaal was in this one because
Katie Holmes casting just gets worse by the day.
Well, because the thing with Katie Holmes is, I was talking to someone about this yesterday. She plays it like she's in a Marvel movie. Just the way she's acting and the way she's reacting to certain scenes, it feels like she's the love interest in a Marvel movie, not a prestige Christopher Nolan thing. So I'm not really a big fan of that. I love Ra's al Ghul. I love the League of Shadows and how it's a villain. It's a set of villains you didn't really get to see. It's not like the first Batman movie they're going to throw in Penguin or something. They threw in a kind of a deep cut villain. Yeah, I just think it's an awesome origin story, and it you could tell Nolan had such a fucking vision, and he really became this movie really put him on the map as the guy in charge of Hollywood. And it's so good. It's almost a perfect movie. I don't have any flaws with it, really. I think it's just the fact that I wouldn't say the action's horrendous, by the way, either. I think it's fine.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
But I think it's just the fact. It's almost how I look at the Terminator compared to Terminator 2, where I think the Terminator's awesome. And it's a near perfect movie, and it really set the stage and cemented Cameron's legacy. But that sequel outdid it in every way, and it just became a whole different beast, a whole different animal. So I'll stop there. But Batman Begins, awesome.
Yeah, Batman Begins. It's really, really great. I would make an argument to say that it is the single best superhero origin movie ever made because, like you said, Brandon, there's a reason why we haven't seen another. The first Iron Man comes pretty close. Well, I will say I love the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the original Superman 78,
but when you think of Captain Marvel and Ant-Man, it's kind of tough to
Yeah, definitely, yeah, especially we'll get to that. But anyways, Matt, I mean, we clearly understand. We understand the Dark Knight Rises. That's where it's at. Come on, man. This shit. I know the Dark Knight. No one can ever argue with the Dark Knight. There's a reason why. Like I said, I'm saving it for a whole bit. But I mean, come on, dude. The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight Rises. This is the first Batman movie I ever saw in theaters. 3 hours. Man, I would watch a 4-hour cut of this movie. This was just everything that I wanted from because the other thing too that this movie added that I will say that was the very underrated aspect, because famously, I didn't get a chance to watch Return of the King in theaters, right? And I had Deathly Hallows Part 2 the year before, but I'd never gotten my full conclusion to a trilogy. I'd never really gotten to see that in the theaters before, and Dark Knight Rises was my first. Then I would obviously get War for the Planet of the Apes a couple years later, but Dark Knight Rises really was my first, and I understand all the flaws with this movie. As time has gone on and the internet became a thing, because I would say that this is the movie, like I said, between this movie and the Avengers, those are the two movies that really started film Twitter as far as where it is now. And what I will say is that I understand the flaws and the nitpicks, but man, this movie, it's just the fact that
I wouldn't say nitpicks.
It's Nolan.
Pretty sizable.
There's problems.
There are problems. There are problems with the movie.
Trying to diminish the issues.
But look, for Nolan kind of pulling off and actually managing to finish the vision that he started, you know, however many years before that it was, the fact that he was kind of in a hole after Ledger died, and the fact that, wow, okay, I can't ever bring back this version of the Joker ever again. And the fact that he was confident enough to like have a concluding arc and actually like, you know, okay, let's actually see Batman at his lowest. Let's actually see like the true fall and literal rise. You know, I know a lot of people complain about him climbing out of the pit in the middle of God only knows where in the Middle East. But to that logic, I always say it's like, look, what is the one thing that we love about Batman? What is the one thing that sets him apart from every other superhero? His plot armor. And I'm sorry, but if you're going to nitpick that, but then like not complain about any of the other like dumb bullshit that we've seen in any of the other Batman movies, like, come on. I know it's the prestige element and all of that, but Dark Knight Rises is just such a blast. I love Anne Hathaway's portrayal as Catwoman. Underrated portrayal. I love Tom Hardy as Bane. I don't care what anyone says, but this voice and the way that he does it, I mean, that'll stick with me forever. That'll stick with me forever. It's been 10 years. The 10 years that movie came out. That voice will stick with me forever. I love it. I just love it so much. The way that they bring back the ties to Batman Begins, even though the Talia twist, I'm not the biggest fan of, and the fact that it actually does have that, I think, that consistent through line as far as like Alfred wanted to see Batman like actually like get the version of his life back, you know, actually get some form of life. And the fact, hold on, wait, let me finish. The fact that this is the only Batman movie, that Mask of the Phantasm hints at it and then pulls back. Like a Batman movie, it's a parody. This is the only Batman movie to date that actually has him stepping away from the Batman role. I understand that the execution doesn't work for everyone, but the fact that this is the only Batman movie that actually has him move on past Batman and actually find some catharsis. Name me one other Batman property that's done that.
That point's fine. I think the thing with the Alfred thing though is they set that up so on the nose in the beginning, where he's like, I had this vision that one day, years from now, you'd be in Rome and you'd be happy, and we wouldn't say. And then you literally get these same. It's like, oh, whatever.
Subtlety though. When has Nolan ever been subtle about anything in his movie? Watch. I will
Dark
refer
Knight
you
in the Dark Knight.
I will refer you to all of Inception, the most unsubtle movie ever made. That is all that I will say there. Matt, why is The Dark Knight Rises the second best Batman movie ever made?
It's a movie that just gets me up in the morning, man. It's heart pumping.
No, it doesn't.
Bro, when that theme goes and they have the chant and he jumps out on
the bus and he takes it and flies out of the explosion. I'm like, let's fucking go.
And he jumps out that tunnel and they're doing the native chant. Oh, dude, that gets me going all the time. And that fight scene between Bane and Batman, a dialogue exchange from Bane, seeing Batman getting his ass whooped, breaking his back.
So you think darkness is your
I do like how every
that was so. And I was watching this too in theaters when it came out, and I was like, "Oh my god, dude, this is epic!" Like I watched Dark Knight when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. But this one, I was like, I kind of pick it up more.
Dude, for a long time, I was convinced that The Dark Knight Rises was better than The Dark Knight for the pure simple fact that I watched The Dark Knight Rises in theaters.
I have a revelation.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Tom Hardy's Bane is just the good version of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze.
Shut
every
up.
line he said. Wait, hear me out.
Hear
me out. Every single line he says is a meme. Like he only speaks in one-liners. They're just good. It's just no. Everything about his is good and memorable. And then with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's shit and all that. Man. But I'm saying like they're similar. No, I'm not saying they're. I'm not saying they're inner character. I'm saying in presentation, they're very similar. I
mean, I'm not going to say that that's completely unjustified, that argument, because Tom Hardy definitely, ever since that portrayal kind of like unearthed like what he really does as an actor, I will say that definitely kind of like exposed the fact that, oh, Tom Hardy is kind of only like a living acting meme where he only likes doing like funny voices and silly over the top performances and deliveries, when he clearly was like at some point being considered as the next James Bond, and then Dark Knight Rises and every role he did after that kind of killed that because they realized, oh, he'd rather just be like silly, But yeah, Matt, you got any closing points before we get to number one?
No, I'll be honest, man. I might throw out a hot take. I might have to do another rewatch, but I think Rises is my personal favorite. My personal favorite,
Rises, dude. I love
personal favorite, but not obviously,
if not for the Dark
one.
Knight not only being like one of the unequivocally the best Batman movie and one of the greatest movies of all time, I would almost agree with you. Like I really, really like. I have a very, very fond place in my heart for The Dark Knight Rises and how awesome it is. And everybody that says that it's a bad movie, I won't take a shot at you here. Everybody that says that it's a bad movie, is wrong. I will say that because it's not a bad movie.
Well, they're not because it's subjective.
You know what I mean. Let me have this.
I'll say that Dark Knight Rises has like highs and lows. I think its highs are higher than any high in Batman Begins, but I think Batman Begins is more consistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That I will give you. I will give you that. But guys, we've been here for an hour. Let's wrap this up. Let's nerd out. We all know it. Like I said, everybody on the internet has talked about this movie to death. It's the best Batman movie ever made. It's one of the best movies ever made. The fact that it was snubbed for Best Picture caused the Oscars to completely change how many movies are eligible. Still didn't do jack shit for superhero movies, but hey, it's the movie that officially solidified. Batman Begins was the first one. Then this is the movie that officially solidified that superhero cinema was here to stay and dominate for the next, goddamn it, 14 years of its existence. I can't believe this movie's going to be 14 years old this year. It's The Dark Knight. I mean, come on. The movie that gave us Ledger's Joker. Like, I mean, come on. Rip, guys. This is... I mean, what else can we even say about this movie? It's phenomenal. Like, there is... I mean, I know that... I will say this. Like, I've listened to the Rewatchables episode on this a couple times. They pointed out a couple of flaws and nitpicks with it as far as its portrayal, but it's like... Explain it to me. Break it down. What is it that makes this just so quintessentially perfect?
Well, I'll go first. I think when you look at cinematic history, I think there are a few sequels that are like just like the definitive sequels. You know, Godfather 2, Empire Strikes Back. I think Terminator 2, Aliens, Spider-Man 2. Dark Knight's easily up there, and it's cool. It's cool for us because it's kind of like our Godfather. Like it came out in our lifetime, and it's hailed on all the websites as like one of the great movies of all time, and everybody's in agreement. Like this is one of the great movies of all time. There's not a whole lot of naysayers. I think it's a pretty damn perfect movie. I think it's like a bullet train in terms of pacing. It's intricate. It's mature. It doesn't spoon feed anything to the audience. Like there's, you know, that the first two acts is really interesting. It's like a crime thriller. It's like Heat, you know? So you're watching it, and I know that's kind of what Nolan took inspiration from a little bit was from Heat, especially that opening sequence. But you're watching it, and you have to think about what characters are saying. You know what I mean? It's not just like the characters looking at the camera and saying, I'm going to go do this so we can go do this. Like the plot's very intricate. It's very real world. I think it has some of the best action in any Batman movie, specifically that tanker kind of the tumbler car chase.
Yeah.
What was it? What was this? Tractor trailer, whatever it is. You know, the big truck that drives the parts. And then, you know, but it's amazing. Heath Ledger is one of the best acting performances I've ever seen because he's the only actor other than Bryan Cranston as Walter White where I look at him and I don't see the actor at a certain point. I go, where is this guy? How is that voice coming out of that guy? How is it that he's behind that makeup? You know, he really, it's one of the best performances ever put to film.
Let me posit a theory to you guys real quick. Do you think this movie is not hailed the way that it is without Ledger? Because I've heard a lot of theories online that the movie just straight up does not work and could be regarded as a bad movie if not for Ledger. Like, do you guys buy into that or no?
No, I think Ledger gets you through the door, and then I think the rest of the movie is kind of what keeps you there. You know what I mean? Like Ledger was the talk of the town at the time the movie was coming out, not just because of his death, but because everyone was like, his performance is awesome. This is crazy. So everyone was rushing to see that, you know, if you weren't like into Batman Begins already. But like when you actually sit there and watch the movie, it's impossible not to get into that movie. It's one of those once in a generation movies that's just perfect. Everybody loves it, from the most pretentious critics to the most like kind of like mainstream movie fans who only want to see explosions. It really nails it on every single level. It's very intricate. The finale is insane. I think that's my favorite part of the movie. The boat experiment. You know, there's so many scenes in the movie that are just like classic moments. Like the whole movie's full of them, and because it's all real world, there's not a lot of CGI at all. The movie's never gonna date. You're always gonna be able to watch it and go like, oh yeah, this is timeless. Even something like I think T2 is a little similar, where there are a few effects where it's like, oh, that's dated, but for the most part, they filmed a lot of it real world practical, so you can watch it nowadays and be like, this is still so awesome. You know what I mean? That's why a lot of those films hold up, is because the way they're shot and, you know, created, it doesn't feel CGI kind of heavy.
Absolutely. Matt, why is we've talked a lot about superhero movies in the last year and a half that we've known you on this channel. Why is The Dark Knight the quintessential superhero movie experience?
It's just probably the most well-crafted one. Like a lot of these superhero movies, they have their moments, they have their things, but you could tell there's stuff still leaving on the board for, you know, everyone, right? And we talked about, you know, critics from ranging for people who don't like superhero movies. This falls in through that right middle gap of it. And just, I mean, I can't really say much about it because I just think everyone has said it, and Brandon put it.
It's the gold standard of
really,
movie making.
It really is, and it's set the bar way too high. Like I think people are, with this new one coming out, I think people are just jumping they're jumping the shark a little bit too much. They're like, okay, let's tame it down a bit. This is still the gold standard. This is still what we're striving for each movie.
Oh, sorry, you can finish. I'm sorry.
For, you know, The Dark Knight, and I will just going back with the theory, your theory. It's a great movie, but yes, Ledger takes it to that next level. If you don't have Ledger as Joker and the nuance of his performance and just the small details he does, I just don't see it, man. I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. The thing that I'll add to the conversation, because like I said, everybody and their mother has talked to death about this movie, and I've already gone on record on saying that, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, this is top 3 for me of all time. This movie's right behind. Yeah. This movie's like right behind Godfather and Godfather 2 as like the number, as like one of the forget like superhero movie, one of the best movies ever made. And I've been thinking about a lot about why that is recently, and I think that it comes down to this. As far as like kind of taking out a nitty gritty, because obviously this movie, again, it's a perfect movie, but it's not completely like flawless. It does have like small micro problems here and there, but I think just as far as like kind of captivating what it is, like kind of the position that it takes up within the story, right? I talked about this a lot with trilogies before, where in a perfect ideal trilogy, right, in addition to each film being their own great story, each kind of part of the trilogy takes up the neat little, you know, its own niche and like its own version of the act, right? Movie 1 is act 1, you know, the introduction to the conflict. You know, act 2, that's where the actual conflict happens, and then act 3, that's the resolution, that's the wrap-up phase, you know. And very, very few trilogies actually pull that off across the course of its 3 movies. Even some of the best ones, like to me, Indiana Jones does not do that, mostly because Temple of Doom is a prequel. I think it's only a couple trilogies that have done that. I do think the Godfather trilogy has done that. As much people hate 3, I think Godfather trilogy has done that. I think the original Star Wars trilogy has done that. I think the Apes trilogy has done that, the new one. And I think the Toy Story trilogy has done that, with the exception of 4. And I think the Dark Knight trilogy has done that in spades, because when you think of just confrontation as far as the hero being pushed to his absolute max by the perfect antagonist, you look no further than this movie. Every other middle installment, that every other sequel, you know, you talk about the best sequels of all time. I mean, you know, the T-1000, Vader, and Empire, you know, any of the guys in Godfather 2, they all pale in comparison to Ledger as the Joker. He is the perfect antagonist because he does what the perfect antagonist is supposed to do, in that he challenges the hero on all of his core beliefs and breaks them, and almost goes one step further as far as proving him wrong in his beliefs. I think the only reason kind of why Ledger has the edge up over Killmonger in that instance, who I think is the first villain since Ledger to have really effectively proved that, is that at the end of the day, Killmonger almost verges on the too sympathetic side because of what he's fighting for. Ledger, because you just have nothing.
Just
nothing. You know nothing about him. You don't know who he is. There's no backstory. There's no nothing. Everything he's telling you is a lie.
It's a lie,
and that's both captivating and terrifying, all at the same time. Like all
and
at
it's
the
Joker.
same time.
It's very much Joker-ish.
Yeah, as Joker. And it's completely kind of insane as far as how he pulls that off, just from a baffling standpoint, when you consider that literally not even a full 3 years beforehand, he was the dude in Brokeback Mountain, you know? And the fact that we were kind of so robbed of Ledger so soon, like right when he was just starting to come to his own. Obviously he'd had a few things before. He had 10 Things I Hate About You. He'd had, he had Knight's Tale. He had Ned Kelly. He had Monsters Ball. He had The Patriot. He had like a couple movies that were showing his talent. But for him to go this hard, for me, I mean, I'm back and forth all the time between him and Brando as far as the greatest on-screen movie performance of all time. But like, as far as I'm concerned, it's him. If only for the fact that De Niro comes in and essentially like kind of does what Brando's doing for 2. But I know obviously, people will go in for Pacino as 2, but for me, nobody touches Brando in those movies. But yeah, Ledger to me is the greatest performance of all time. And I don't feel bad about saying that one bit. It is just the ultimate quintessential Batman experience, but also in a strange way, it is the quintessential movie experience, which I think is ultimately what it is that a lot of superhero movies now are missing, is that they are superhero things first and foremost, but they forget to be movies. And that's what The Dark Knight does. And that's why The Dark Knight is not only the greatest Batman movie, one of the greatest movies of all time. That's my spiel. I feel like that's kind of all the breadth that I have as far as deciphering it. But we did it, guys. We did another awesome rankings. You guys did great. I love having you guys back on. This is a lot of fun. For everybody who is new to the channel, both on YouTube and Twitch, go follow both these guys on everything that they've got going on. Matt, where can people find you?
You guys can follow me at Basic Entertainment. Gonna have some stuff that is Batman related coming soon to the channel. And of course, always a pleasure, Dom, for inviting me to talk some Batman, talk some superheroes, and talk all great things of movies. So thank you.
Of course. Brandon, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Vimeo. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I guess I guess I'll just say my
Letterboxd.
I don't really want to promote any of my stuff, so I'll just say Letterboxd, which is my name, Brandon Fallat.
Brandon Fallat, or as I have officially deigned you now, B Fallat. That's going to be your new nickname every time you come on. It just works. It kind of works like almost like B Rabbit, but I like B Fallat better ultimately. So of course, B Rabbit of 8 Mile fame turns 20 years old this year. Good Lord, we're old. What's it called? Follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow us on the Talkin TV, Facebook, Instagrams, and Twitter at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. If you're new on here, if you're watching us here for the first time on Twitch, be sure to follow us here. And also be sure to go over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to us there, click the bell button. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. We'll be back on Sunday on Twitch with our full review for the Batman. I'll also be getting my initial reactions out after I see it tomorrow. And for myself, from Brandon, from Matt, as always, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. And as always, let's love some Batman. Take care, guys.